Hey all, welcome to Parker's Reefs. On today's episode, my brand new reef tank, the UN Systems R60 has arrived, and I've got to work out where to put it before we go about setting it up. Alright, thank you for joining me on yet another episode of Parker's Reefs, and as touched on in the intro, this week I got a call from my local fish shop. Dave called me up and said, Sam, your brand new UN Systems R60 reef tank has arrived, and I can tell you I am super excited to go and unbox this system and go over all of the incredible features that it has. But there's one little problem that I've got to work out before we do that, and that is work out exactly where this tank is going to go. And to do that, I'm going to go over the 6 things that I like to consider when working out where to put a reef tank. Once we know where we're putting it, we'll then jump into the unboxing and going over all of the incredible features of that system, all in today's video. Alright, so let's go through these 6 factors to consider, and then we'll go around my house and see if we can find the ideal location for this brand new system. The first factor to consider is having enough space to put the tank. Now, I know that sounds incredibly obvious, but I'm not just talking about enough dimensions to slot the tank into position. I'm also talking about enough space around the tank so that you can access it and do work on it. There is nothing worse than when you've got to get down on your hands and knees to pull a skimmer out of the sump or test your water or do dosing or whatever it may be, and you've got to climb over couches or furniture, or you've got to reach from a long distance. It just makes maintenance near impossible, and I know from experience, if you make maintenance difficult or a challenge, it's not going to happen, and before you know it, you are starting to spiral down the depths of reef tank no return. You want to make sure that maintenance is as easy as possible, and the first thing to consider when doing that is giving yourself room around the tank to make sure that you can work on it. Now, the second factor I like to consider, again, would seem like a fairly obvious one, but we do need to factor it in, and that is you need to have access to power. These tanks do use a lot of power and always have probably 3 to 4 times the number of power outlets required than you initially think they will. So you either need to have access to good power points where you want to put the tank, or you're going to need to get your electrician to put power points where you want to put the tank. The absolute last thing you want to do is to have to run extension leads from somewhere else to where you want to put the tank. It's a trip hazard, it's dangerous, it's ugly, and it's just not going to work all that well at all. We want to make sure wherever we're going to put this tank has plenty of access to power. Alright, the next factor is probably not quite as obvious at the starting point, but will soon become very evident down the track, particularly as you go through different seasons, and that is temperature control. We don't want our reef tanks to experience high highs and low lows, and for that reason, we want to have them in a spot where their temperature is somewhat regulated, just to limit the impact on things like our heaters and chillers. If the room where you're putting your tank frequently gets to 30, maybe even 40 degrees Celsius, it's going to be very difficult to keep it stable long term. And likewise, if you were thinking about putting your reef tank maybe outside on a patio or something, and you live in fairly cooler climates and your outside temperature is going to get maybe below 10 degrees Celsius, it's again putting a huge load onto those heaters and really setting yourself up for failure should any one of those heaters or chillers fail. For that reason, I do like to consider somewhere where we're generally living in the house, because I like to think if we're in that space, we want to control the temperature of that space as well. And if we're comfortable, the tank is generally comfortable as well. Temperature consideration is something a lot of people overlook at the start and then regret down the line. Alright, the fourth factor to consider is a little bit more controversial, but please let me explain, and that factor is exposure to sunlight. Now, I'm not for a second saying that you should have your reef tank in a pitch black room. Don't get me wrong with that at all, but you don't want to have the tank in a spot where it is blasted all day, every day by natural sunlight. It will make things a little bit difficult at times, particularly when you have algae outbreaks. And the other thing it will do is also wash the color of your tank out. Particularly in this day and age, we do like to run our tanks fairly blue. I'm a little bit more old school and like to go a little bit more of a natural spectrum. But a lot of people these days really love that very blue spectrum. Now, if you're going to blast your tank with a lot of natural sunlight, it's going to take so much blue light to try and overcompensate for that. and it's going to cost you a lot in lights, and it's also going to cost you a lot in power. So you want to have somewhere where the tank is not blasted by natural sunlight, but I will say a little bit of natural sunlight is a thing of beauty when you see your tank maybe early morning before the lights come on, and a quarter of the tank's getting a little bit of natural sunlight. Gives you a very different perspective on how things look in your tank. Natural sunlight can also play a huge factor in the temperature of our tank. If you decided to put your tank directly in front of a window, it's most likely going to get a lot more heat and a lot more cool from that window, as it's not as well insulated as our walls may be. So there's multiple factors at play there, but ideally we want to limit the amount of natural sunlight. Finding that balance between somewhere that is just getting full-blown natural sunlight and obviously not being in a complete pitch black dark room is very important when looking for a location for your reef tank. All right, the fifth factor to consider when looking for a place to put your new reef tank. This one is something that absolutely has to be considered, particularly when you go to larger tanks, and that is the suitability of your flooring. Now, this factor has multiple sub-factors that you should look into. Obviously, it needs to be weight bearing. You can't go and put a 4 or 5 ton tank on some pretty average floorboards that don't have a lot of structural integrity below them. It will cause structural damage to your house and is the last thing we want to do. Now, thankfully for me, I am on a concrete slab, so when it comes to weight bearing capacity, I can pretty well put my reef tank anywhere. But there's 2 other things in flooring that I definitely recommend you consider as well. The first one being, make sure that space is level. Now, again, if you're on a concrete slab, it should be pretty level, but if your flooring is not level, it's going to cause you no end of headaches. You're going to have to adjust your reef tank a long way to try and get the water level in the system, and it's going to cause all sorts of issues with your stand. You want to make sure the spot you're putting is level, and you definitely cannot not afford to have any sort of rocking or anything at all. I know this seems obvious, but please do make sure that space is level before picking that location for your reef tank. Okay, now the last thing to consider when we're talking about flooring for your reef tank is the inevitable spillage. Whilst we all do absolutely everything we can to put fail-safes in to mitigate these spillages, the sad reality of it is, if you have a reef tank, at some point in time you are going to have either a minor or a major spillage, and the truth of it probably is you're going to have multiple. Now, if you put your tank on a floor surface that is not going to be so accepting of a spillage, you are setting yourself up for failure. Now, I personally have had all sorts of spillages, from RODI leaks through to saltwater leaks to me knocking over dosing supplements or even knocking over test tubes when doing testing of parameters. The reality of it is, if I had carpet down here or very precious wood flooring, it would cause me no end of trouble. And I'm not just talking about the reef tank, but I'm also talking about my relationship and the harmony in this household. The last thing you want to do is put that up for risk. So please do consider, when you are looking for a suitable spot to put your reef tank, somewhere that is going to minimize the damage should you have that inevitable spill. All right, the 6th and final factor, in my opinion at least, of what you should consider when finding a location for your reef tank, and probably I would say the most important factor, is finding a location where you're going to see the tank. I know that sounds so trivial, but the number of times I see reef tanks put in locations that people only go in to feed the fish or to have a look at it for a few minutes a day, it is an absolute waste of your time, effort, and money. You put a lot of energy and resourcing into your reef tank. You want to put it in a spot where you can see it, enjoy it, and also notice when things aren't going well, so you can jump in and act as quickly as possible. Now, this is a space that I can speak from experience, as I have made this mistake before. I had put previously a number of fish tanks in a fish room, which is otherwise known as a study, and I can say that those fish tanks only got visited for 1 or 2 minutes a day when I'd go in there on autopilot to feed the fish. As a result, those fish got very sensitive to people and movement, and as soon as I went into that room, they would scatter and not be enjoyed at all. And because I was going in there on autopilot just to feed the fish, I was going in there with a purpose and probably not paying enough attention to those tanks and not really recognizing something going wrong in the system, which did set myself up for disaster as well. And obviously, ultimately, no one really got to enjoy those systems. They were tucked away in a corner. They were just there existing, not really thriving and not being enjoyed by the whole family, and of course our visitors as well. So for that reason, I love to see reef tanks put somewhere like a living space like this one is here, which is really in a combined kitchen, living and dining space. Whether I'm cooking dinner, whether I'm watching TV, whether I'm eating dinner or just relaxing on the couch, more often than not, I find myself drifting my eyes away from the TV and onto this beautiful Dream Reef tank to enjoy something that's a little bit different and not something that's just a repetition on TV. But unfortunately for me, this position is taken and my new reef tank can absolutely not go here. So let's grab the camera and have a little bit of a look around my house and see if we can find another suitable location for this brand new reef tank. Okay, so as we start to look for locations for this new reef tank, it is worth taking a minute to point out why the Dream Reef Tank is located where it is. And from this location here, you can see right where I sit on the couch to view the beautiful TV shows, movies, and of course my fellow YouTubers' content creation. I can easily drift my eyes across to check out what is happening in the tank. You can also see my dining table right there in front of it. So while I'm eating dinner, I get a fantastic opportunity with the family to all sit back and enjoy all of the interactions with the fish and enjoy how the corals are growing. Across this way is our kitchen, so we also have an unimpeded view right from there when preparing meals, so it works quite well. Now, obviously there are all of those other factors we need to consider, not just how many times we see the tank, and I can say that I do have enough space around at least 3 sides of this system to get good access to do that maintenance. That was no accident. This tank was designed exactly to that size, so I could fit around all 3 sides of it, and on the back side of it is our laundry, and even outside is that storage box where I keep my chiller and UV. So that was definitely factored into the size considerations of where to locate that tank. If you can recall with the Dream Reef Tank, power was a consideration. There was power points there, but I went and upped that and had a dedicated circuit installed by my electrician that is also battery backed up. So power has a huge tick there as well. Now, for the temperature of the location, I can say that as this is our primary living space, we do have a large split system there. We also have a gas central heating there, but thankfully the split system does the heavy lifting for us, both in the summer and winter, and keeps this room a very comfortable temperature all year round. As for exposure to sunlight, really the only location I get is through this window to the left of the tank there. I can control that with the curtains, but I can say that it's under a patio cover here, which doesn't get too much light. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, the perfect amount of sunlight exposure. And then lastly, the flooring. This was something that we upgraded before getting this tank in place. We used to have flooring here with hardwood and also carpet. We've now replaced that with a hybrid waterproof vinyl plank, which is fantastic. Not that I've really had any sort of major spills in the Dream Reef Tank, but if I did, they would be completely covered and be easy to clean up. So that works well. Now, if you can recall from the first video with this brand new reef tank, I am looking to recreate the magic I had with my first ever reef system, which was a Red Sea Max and a soft coral display. Now that tank actually had 3 different locations throughout its lifespan with me. One was where the Dream Reef Tank was, one was on the kitchen bench over here, and one was in the fish room, which we'll have a look at all 3 of those in a minute. Obviously, it can't go where the Dream Reef Tank is. I'm not moving that tank. That's never going to happen. But one spot that does look like a potential candidate is over here on this wall, right next to where my very noisy budgie is. Looking at that, it is in the good location where we can all see it. Shouldn't get too much exposure to sunlight. It'll get a little bit through the windows either side of it, but it does have this nice wall protecting it there. Obviously has the same flooring that the Dream Reef Tank has. Power is a consideration though, because I don't actually have any power points here. These are wireless light switches, so they don't actually have any power to them, but it is a location that I think I could get my electrician to run an outlet down to. So it's an option, although I will say it would start to crowd this location here a little bit. As it is, we already have to take the budgie away to sit 6 people at our table. If it's just the 3 of us, we'll sit on this side or maybe one over here. If I put a reef tank there, that may cause some problems, and I probably would need to find a new location for the budgie. Otherwise, well, his feathers and seed would get in the tank all the time, which would probably not be ideal. Now, I did mention the second option I had, well, the second location that that soft coral tank existed was actually on my kitchen bench here, which worked really, really well. It was in a good location for access. We'd see it while eating breakfast, while preparing meals. You could see it from the couch. All of those locations were great. There is power and a pretty decent number of power points behind there. But like I touched on with this system, I wanted to upgrade the filtration. The Red Sea Max had a back chamber for filtration, so no sump required, which meant I didn't have to have a stand. I could sit the tank up in there, and it worked pretty well. This system, I want to make the maintenance a little bit easier, so I have opted for a tank that has a sump, and I really don't want to go about trying to drill through this stone benchtop and putting a sump underneath. Plus, the UN Systems R60 has a beautiful cabinet, and I don't really want to discard that. So I don't think this location is going to work all that well. Now, there was a final destination for that soft coral tank, and it was through here in what was my fish room. The fish room has since been replaced with a arcade room, which now holds both my arcade games, my consoles, pinballs, and of course my collection of games and movies down here as well. So I really don't want to put a reef tank in here now. I've got quite a collection of fairly vintage electronics in here that I don't think are going to enjoy the salt water and humidity. Plus, I've kind of got a theme going on in this room. So that's all before we even consider the fact that I touched on how it didn't really work in this room. I'd only ever come in here to feed them. So we're going to count this off the marks for now. But there is one more location I want to consider, and it's actually through here in the office. And you may recall this section here, which is where I often do the intros and outros of my video. I do work from home and I spend a fair bit of my time there, and whilst I don't have power or really space for it there, plus it would ruin my intros and outro video there, I do have this big wall here right next to the new storage my wife had put in. I do have this big space here, which is right at the front door of our house. In fact, if I take a step back so you see something other than the wall, you see my dog enjoys sitting in her bed all day while I work. This wall here would be a pretty reasonable location in that I do spend a decent amount of the time each and every day in here working at my desk. It has plenty of space around the tank there. The flooring, okay, it is carpet, but it's carpet that is almost due for replacement anyway. In fact, we probably could have extended this new flooring across there. So if I did get a spill on that, I don't think I would get divorced, which is always good. I don't have power there though. It is one factor that is a problem. I could get my electrician to put some power points there. And one other thing I will point out is this is the front of our house, which actually faces west, and we get quite a bit of heat in here in the summer afternoons. So I'd probably also need to consider an air conditioner in this space, which wouldn't be the end of the world because some days it does get pretty warm in here, hence the fan down there. It's an option, but I've got to say, I have a plan B in mind, and I might head up to my local fish shop now, Deer Park Aquarium, to talk with Dave, have a look at this brand new tank and see if he's open to my plan B. Maybe we'll jump in the car and hit the highway.
Hey Sam, tank's in.
Awesome news, very exciting.
Where's it going?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question because, as you know, there are a number of factors you need to consider when you're looking to put your reef tank.
Definitely.
Firstly, you need somewhere where you've got a little bit of space, somewhere to work around the tank.
Access to get in there and get everything done.
You jam it into a corner or somewhere between two bits of furniture, you can't get in and around and work on it. It just makes maintenance an absolute nightmare.
You're gonna need power.
Power, unfortunately, these tanks can't run off wireless. They do need power, and they need a good few power outlets. So I don't want to be running extension cords around the lounge room or anything like that.
Temperature?
Yes, temperature is a factor. Obviously, if it's super cold or super hot, you're going to be using even more of that electricity to maintain at that 25 degrees.
And you want to minimize natural sunlight?
Yeah, for a couple of reasons, really. I mean, natural sunlight tends to make the tanks look a little bit bland. I mean, sometimes a little bit of natural sunlight gives you a nice sort of scenic moment, but it tends to make things look a bit yellow and a bit brown.
Yeah. And then you're going to get some spills, so you want to make sure the flooring's suitable.
Yeah, you're spot on. I definitely will do everything I can to minimize spills, but the reality of it is
it's going to happen.
We're human, we're going to spill water, we're going to spill food, we're going to spill test kits, or we're going to spill something or other, and I don't want to do it on $1 million antique wood flooring that's irreplaceable because I'm not ready to get divorced over this reef tank.
And lastly, but most importantly, somewhere people are going to see it.
Yep, could not agree more. I've had reef tanks before that I've put into a different room, like a fish room, that I only come and see once a day when I go to feed the fish, and to be fair, they just don't get enough traffic and it's a bit of a waste of a reef tank. So I do agree, I like to have a tank somewhere where you see it, if not all day, every day, but at least a good part of your time. And that's where I've drawn a little bit of a blank at home. So I wanted to see if it was possible, if there was somewhere we could put it here where people are going to see it all day, every day.
We can find some space.
Great, thank you. Okay, so while we take a look at the UN Systems R60 as it comes in the two boxes here, Dave has picked out a spot that has plenty of room, has good access to power, is well temperature controlled, doesn't have too much natural sunlight, has suitable flooring, and of course the all-important feature of having plenty of foot traffic all day, every day, right up here on this platform where his display tanks are going to go. Now you can see how easy it is to unbox this system. I've just undone the 8 screws on the base, lifted that crate off the top, and now taking all of the protective packaging off the cabinet. Once that's done, I'll get Dave to give me a hand, and we'll lift that up into position and go about doing the same thing for the tank. So now that's up there, I've taken the crate off the tank. You can see all the plumbing and accessories inside the glass box there. I'm going to lift that up onto the tank and get busy there. Now this is where I might jump to some of the footage from the promotional team at UN Systems, because you can see here that the plumbing actually arrived in the weir on this little holder plate. So you don't need someone to hold the top half of the bulkheads while you're screwing the bottom half in. I personally think that is incredible, because as you can see here, it doesn't mean I need a second person or anything like that. I can just start screwing these bulkheads on from the bottom and I am in business. Small, then large, and then small again. But if you're not sure, it does come with QR codes. And of course, the plumbing even comes zip tied in the actual layout that it needs to go on your tank. So there's absolutely no room for mistakes. Screws on nice and easily. Then you grab the plumbing that connects to those bulkheads. This piece here is the return pipe that connects up to our return pump, and it also has a little accessories port coming off the side there. Then we grab our full siphon here. So this is the one that has that very high quality gate valve there, which allows us to dial in the height of the water in that weir. And then last but not least, we will grab the emergency drain, which screws onto the right hand side there, and of course goes through the filter chamber, which is as easy as you could ever want to set up a reef tank. I will actually jump out and we'll have a look at the time lapse from a little bit further out. But as you can see with the close-up there, it just doesn't get much easier than that. You can see the plumbing there all on that cardboard box, zip tied in position, and me screwing it away there very, very nicely indeed. And as you can see, just one person working on it in a matter of minutes. Now there are a few other features here that we can have a look at. First one here being the little ATO or the RO reservoir. We'll have a closer look at that one in a second and how that works, but we're going to jump in and have a look at the tank's features now. And firstly, when you walk up to the tank, it's got a beautiful presence. You can see this dual inlet weir, which takes water from the bottom and the top. And the weir cover on the top here has this big cutout here, so you can mount your light arm on there. Very well done. And the plumbing inside that weir accommodates that arm. It's got plenty of room there, so you can screw that on right in the middle of that weir, so you don't have to worry about having offset lights, which does my OCD absolute chaos. Next thing you can see down here is the beautiful glass here. It actually has 45-degree beveled edges here. Now that is something I've not seen on a reef tank before, only on high-end freshwater systems, and it gives a beautiful clear edge for those seams, which is really just that level up on some of the other tanks I've seen before. Panning around the outside here, you can see some of the beautiful sump and plumbing in there. The plumbing is all in place now and looks an absolute treat. You've got your return pump there, which goes up through up to your return outlets. You've got your accessories port on here, and when I open that, you'll see some water comes out. That's because the factory actually water tests these pipes before they send them to you. So when they glue them, they make sure they're glued properly. I absolutely love that. Now moving on to our full siphon here, this is the one with the gate valve on it. You can dial that in there. So that's the one that controls the water height in our overflow. And then we've got next to that, got the emergency overflow here, which just catches pretty much all of the air and maybe about 2% of your water. Now that water drains down into this section here, which has a pre-filter tray, which of course is removable, but I think it's going to be super, super handy if you want to run some sort of carbon or media or anything like that. Beneath that, you do have two common sized filter socks, which do also have little silencers on top. You see, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting this out one-handed, but the filter socks are completely removable, and the tray that they sit in is also completely removable should you want to put in a filter roller instead. The team at UN Systems have thought of absolutely everything here, and I really, really like the level of detail they've gone to. As you can see, we've got covers on every single compartment here, so even your filter socks are going to be nice and contained. You then go from that chamber through the bottom into your skimmer chamber, which also has a nice little cover there. That's got plenty of room, and it does have an adjustable baffle in there so that you can dial in the exact height you need for your skimmer. You can raise or lower that little baffle there, and that will set the water height in that chamber, which is an absolute joy, rather than having to have ugly stands or something like that to get your skimmer at the right water height. You've then got this chamber, which again has adjustable baffles, which could be used for media or potentially even some sort of refugium. Then you go back to your return pump chamber in the back there, which has dosing line holders, your ATO, and of course the outlet back up to the tank so that you can pump that water back. Now what I do want to do, just as we have a nice little look here at the ATO chamber here, is I'll just put the camera in the tripod, because I want to show you how this little ATO chamber works when you go to refill it. It sits on top of your sump there, and it has this little handle, and when you lift that up and pull that out, it gives you a little pouring spout. You get this piece here, which basically is a funnel which has a filter in it. You sit that on the lid, push it into place, pour your water in to fill up your ATO, take that back out again, put the lid back down, and your ATO is now tidy. I absolutely love that. Very, very clever thinking, works a treat and uses that space really, really well. Over on the left-hand side, this is where we have our power center. We've got this nice little removable plate here to put our controllers and also hide our power bricks behind there. This is all PVC constructed here, which is deliberately designed for heat and fire so that it doesn't catch on fire, which is always a good thing when we're dealing with electricity. And that sits all in very neatly behind these magnetic doors, which is very, very clever. You can see some holes there, so if you're doing dosing pumps or things, you can run those lines straight down to the dosing pump lines there on your sump. Now, if I grab one of the doors, and I'm going to do this one-handed just to show how cool this is, they are completely magnet attachable. So you don't actually have any hinges whatsoever. You literally just put the door in this sort of channel and line it up, and the magnets will grab it from there. Now that is the same on all three sides. You have no door on the back, that is open to let the system breathe a little bit. But for each of the sides, you've got these magnetic panels, which do, as magnets tend to do, just snap into place. Absolutely beautiful design, and particularly good. We talked about requiring a bit of space to work on the tank before. This is going to give you a little bit more space, because you don't have to worry about dealing with cabinets with the doors opened. You got to have room for that. These ones will take off the cabinet in much, much less space than you need for a hinged door, which I think is very, very clever. Now, just taking a step back to admire my last 20 minutes worth of work, which is about how long it took me to set up this system with the doors on or the doors off. It is a spectacular looking reef tank, and I cannot wait to set this up. And I've got to say, Dave has found a spot that meets all of the requirements. With plenty of space to work, we'll have good access to power. The temperature in the store is always maintained. Going to have not too much exposure to sunlight. The flooring is purpose built for this. And as you can see here, it has a pole position or prime location up on the back wall, where Dave is planning to set up some other display tanks where people are going to see this system all day, every day. And of course, take part of the journey in this system getting set up and cycled in store at Deer Park Aquarium, which I think is a really, really cool outcome. All right, guys, there you have it. That is the 6 factors you should consider when trying to find the ideal location for your brand new reef tank. And for me, it ended up being at my local fish shop, which is probably a great outcome, because this can now become the people's tank, and I can share every step of the journey with you, either here on YouTube or in person at Deer Park Aquarium, which I think is a really good outcome and probably helps keep my power bill down a little bit here at home. We also obviously had a look at the unboxing of that system, which I've got to say is about as easy as it gets. You've got 2 boxes. One box has the stand and sump in position. The other one has the glass box itself. Put the glass box on top of the stand, screw in the pre-glued plumbing, and you are set up. Now, of course, there is a bit more we'll need to cover in future videos around leveling that, around putting sand and rock in, putting equipment in, and of course, starting our cycle. We'll cover that in due course, because next weekend's video will be on the Apex Aquatics grand opening celebrations that is actually happening today and tomorrow at their brand new local fish shop right here in Melbourne. I'll be there for both days helping out with the event, but also capturing all of the footage to share with you guys that cannot make the event. There promises to be a heap of fun things going down, from a huge amount of giveaways, some incredible stock, great fun and activities for all of the family, food, and a lot more. So I look forward to seeing all of you who can make it on those days there. And if you can't, rest assured I will have the footage right here on Parker's Reef next weekend to share with you all. Now, I do want to take an opportunity to give a shout out to these names on screen here. These are my channel members who do chip in a couple of dollars each and every month to make these videos possible, and you get my most humble support for that. Thank you so much. It really does make this channel possible. And for everyone else out there, if you can't spare a couple of dollars, I completely understand, but I would ask a favor if you could subscribe to the channel. It costs no money and takes 2 seconds of your time, and it really helps the growth of this channel. There is a button down in that bottom corner which will make that possible for you. Other than that, guys, I don't have anything else to say other than I hope you're enjoying the series. If there's anything in particular you want to see covered on the setup of this brand new reef tank, please do let me know in the comment section down below. I do personally reply to each and every comment, and I'm definitely looking to make sure that I cover all angles of this process so that you guys get a complete and thorough overview of all things we need to do to get a reef tank up and running as best as we possibly can. Anyway, guys, I'll leave you with that. Till next time, stay safe, keep reefing. Cheers, bye.